Greetings War Thunderers, this is Longshot with you again, with my guide to flying the F6F Hellcat in arcade. In World War II the Hellcat was the first US Navy fighter that was able to counter the Mitsubishi Zero. It was fast and tough, with good high-speed handling. In War Thunder it's a Tier 2 plane with a battle rating of 3.3. Anyway, I'll start by looking at the armour. Firstly, there's not one but two armoured plates behind the pilot, each looking like it'd stop heavy machine gun fire and probably 20mm cannon as well. The windshield's armoured as well, so the pilot's well protected from rear or frontal attacks. There's also light armour above and beneath the engine and its components, which should make this plane less prone to engine fires. As I'll show later though, it does nothing of the sort. Switching to components, reveals a cluster of fuel tanks directly beneath the pilot, and oil tanks in front of him and behind the engine. Despite all the armour, both fuel and oil are very likely to catch alight if you take damage, and fires nearly always destroy the plane. So let's move on to the flight test where I'll look at the handling. As usual, I'll start by popping smoke and banking the plane into a horizontal turn to get a feel for the strength of the elevator. If you're used to the Hellcat turning sharply at high speed, think again. It can no longer catch its smoke trail. It no longer has an initial turn as tight as a biplane's. Neither does it bleed at speed as quickly as it did. The plane turns about as well as an Aerocobra, which is to say it's simply not a turn fighter. I'm going to hang in this turn a little longer and gradually the speed drops down to the 250s. And as it does so, the turning circle gets worse. So don't take this into a fur ball and start twisting and turning and expect to survive very long. Next I'm going to measure the relative strength of the rudder versus the elevator. To do that I'm hitting both up elevator and left rudder keys together and watch how the plane responds. And they're pretty much in balance. Maybe the elevator's a bit stronger. It lifts upward more than it pulls to the left, so the rudder is fairly weak, same as the elevator is. I continue into a climbing spiral because the elevator's dominant, the spiral's very steep, until the speeds drop so far that the plane starts to struggle to climb as sharply. If you're used to the left rudder inducing stall spins on this plane, you can relax, it no longer happens. The engine's definitely more powerful than it used to be, the plane's better at maintaining the spiral, continues to gain altitude even at very low speeds. In fact, I'll take it below 90 kilometers an hour and I can still stay in the manoeuvre and in control of the plane. Okay, now I'll look at its roll rate, which is fair. Certainly not as fast as the Focke-Wulf 190, probably more like a 109. Okay, I'm into a dive to see how well its ailerons perform at high speed. Starting at 400 kilometers an hour it starts to slowly tighten up, but even past 600, it's still rolling pretty well. I'll pull the plane from side to side. It does respond, so the rudder hasn't totally locked up either, but well past 700 kilometers it does start to seize up pretty badly. So into a vertical zoom climb. I want to measure how well the plane retains the energy from the dive as well as the power of its engine, and to see how much altitude it's capable of recovering. I don't recommend climbing straight up like this in combat, it'll probably get you shot down. From an altitude of 870 metres at the bottom of the dive, it peaks at nearly 3,500 metres and levels off at 3,300. That's a gain of over 2,400 metres in the zoom climb, which is exceptional. Most energy fighters can only manage around 2,000 metres or less in this test. So the plane isn't a turn fighter, but it has good high-speed handling, a great zoom climb, a sharp spiral climb, and good acceleration as we can see in its recovery here from low speed. It has all the characteristics required to be effective at boom and zoom tactics and stall fighting. One last thing before I go to battle, it's capable of carrying both bombs and rockets. You can choose 6 small rockets, 2 tiny TIMs which are very fast and accurate, 2 500 kilogram bombs, or both the 6 rockets and the bombs. All these options take a very heavy toll on the plane's climb rate, acceleration and handling. Is it worth it? Well, in my experience, no. Not if you're using the plane purely as a fighter. So I'll start with a battle showing how the plane performs at high altitude. My convergence is 300 metres. I'm using the stealth belt. I've experimented with all the belts of this plane and I really don't see much difference in their effectiveness. It's best to dispense with the traces as that gives an extra second or two on target before pilots react. So I'm climbing at an airspeed of around 250 kilometers an hour, which is where the Hellcat has its best climb rate. And you can see my wingman Taranok is doing the same. I'm climbing out to the side of the battle because, as you'll see, this is not the best climber in the game. The first wet gets me to just under 3,000 metres, which is okay, nothing great. I've recently seen experienced pilots take planes with average climb rates straight up the middle toward the enemy and do well. But that's more the exception than the rule, and often planes they do this with have superior dogfighting abilities, which the Hellcat certainly does not. For me, the more cautious approach is more likely to pay off in this plane. The enemy team haven't been bothered to climb and contest altitude in this battle, which is unfortunately common now in Tier 2 arcade. It's far easier to win by rushing the small number of ground targets than by bombing bases. So if there's no bombers up here, why should fighters climb either? Anyway, second WEP's got me into 3,900 metres, which is fairly good, but less than what a Spitfire or Bf-109 can do. There are two bombers up here who decided to fly directly toward me. The SB-2M tried to wiggle around as he went past, but that couldn't save him from a pilot kill. The G4M1 took a different approach, trying to climb, which only nearly stalled his plane, and exposed his belly, which has no protection from gunners. And you should always try to attack the weak spots on bombers like this, as a stray 7.7mm round can will set your engine on fire if you're not careful. Don't want to get too far behind him, as that would expose me to the narrow firing arc from his rear 20mm cannon. So I'm circling to the side. I dodge around a little as I close into convergence range to finish him off. Well, so far so good. We have altitude supremacy without having had to fight for it, but a Spitfire has belatedly decided to climb up and contest it. Now, Taranok pulled up from a false dive at him to bait him into prop hanging, which kindly sets me up with a very easy interception kill. I go into a shallow dive, aiming at the full profile of his plane, zoom in for accuracy, fire from just outside convergence and continuing as I close in. There's a little recoil, but it was fairly easy to hold it on target. Hellcat has no trouble zoom climbing back past 5,000 metres after the attack. Now, of course, once someone's shown an indication that they want to climb, you look to see if they'll try again after they've respawned. I can see the same player is back in another Spitfire, so I wait and watch to see what he does, while of course checking for any other potential climbers. And yes, he's making another attempt. I dive to attack because I'm behind him, making it very difficult for him to force a head-on, giving me the biggest possible target to aim at. I zoom in to aim, but he sees me and pulls to the right. I hit him with a fairly good burst, but only damage his right flap, for all the good that does. Not following him, going up into a zoom climb. I'm watching to see if he tries to follow me, and if he did, I'd hammerhead over, as he'd be very close to stalling, but he chooses to dive away. But he hasn't gone right to ground level, so I'm going to keep watching. Quick check around me. Sure enough, he's starting to climb again. Once I've flown past him, I can dive in for a third time, to attack at the same angle from behind. Once more he tries to dodge, but I hit him this time with a very long string of bullets. And only succeeded in damaging his right flap some more. And that is a major problem with this plane, the unreliability of its weapons. I'll go into that in more detail throughout the video. A little while later I'm chasing down a MiG-3 that's climbing to attack a friendly bomber, and has taken no notice of me whatsoever. Within 2 kilometres I go into a shallow dive, to quickly close the range and prevent him turning to force a head-on, but he's still paying no attention. Open fire just outside convergence range, zoomed in for accuracy. Although it didn't say that, it looked like a pilot knockout. The vast majority of fighters I shot down with a Hellcat were either pilot kills or from setting them alight. Remember the good old days when 50 cal Brownings ripped off tails and wings? It no longer happens hardly at all. So to drop planes you need to be either lucky or get guns on target for a long enough period to start a fire. This H6K charges right at me with his guns blazing, but he only has light machine guns at the front, so I aim carefully for the front of the plane, trying to get either a pilot kill or an engine fire. And I pull quickly to the side to avoid exposure to his rear cannon gunner. And fires tend to destroy H6Ks pretty quickly these days. Back over the airfield, and Nishak looks like he wants to climb. I'm not going to rush to dive at him, as he's carrying rockets and probably wants a head-on. I'm happy just to circle around, wait, watch and see if he'll commit to a climbing attempt. Now, looks like he is now. Slowly gaining me even though I'm climbing. I'll circle again to let him get a bit closer and hopefully get his plane close to stalling. And also to get behind him when I dive. Which I am now. so I'm diving in for the kill. Well, mushaks can be pretty hard to put down sometimes. Lots of bullets, no damage to his plane, but a pilot knockout. And while I was fairly busy at high altitude in this game, I wasn't forced to push the plane to its limits at any stage. But here's a couple of examples that show what the plane's capable of. Firstly, a Spitfire Mark 9 is approaching me from a lower altitude but with plenty of energy, which he uses to helicopter right up at me from underneath. As soon as I see him attack, I'm going into a climbing spiral, keeping him close enough to be interested, but far enough to keep him from getting a clean shot at me. Then when I feel he's about to stall, I exit the spiral, taking a few hits in the process, but then the tables are turned, and I'm firing and praying my guns are capable of finishing him off before he can get moving again. Here's a second example. I've blindsided this pilot already in this game at high altitude. When he respawned, he immediately tried to climb away from the battle in order to get an altitude advantage over me. I wasn't about to give that to him, so I followed, and right here I'm closing in to stop him turning for a head-on. He dives away, but I'm not in a position to follow, so I circle and climb while waiting for him to try and attack from underneath. He chooses not to do so, but instead tries to make another attempt to get separation and climb before I can reach him. And my extra turn here gave him that opportunity. Flying away from him while he's making a run before he starts a zoom climb. So I've made a mistake, I've given him room. Now I need to accelerate as quickly as I can to close the range, denying the chance to engage on equal terms. And yes, it was a very bad time for me to run out of WEP as well. He reaches my altitude, but he's too close now to turn for a head-on. And with weapon now available, the Hellcat is proving to be the faster plane. He decides to try a split S to turn with maximum speed and get out of my guns. And it seems he's going to engage me in a dogfight, so I'm diving also to follow. This time I'm going to stick close. And for the first time in this video, the Hellcat is now in a full-on turning battle. Prior to patch 1.47, I'd have had guns on him very quickly due to the powerful elevators the plane used to possess. That's just not the case now. I'm using both elevator and rudder to try and turn as hard as I can, while spamming WEP to keep my speed high. If I slow down too much, I'll lose my ability to turn. My concern is that he'll also use rudder. If he does, then he'll hold the advantage, as the P-39's rudder is quite strong. But he's content to turn with elevator only, and I keep getting snapshots each time we pass, though neither of us is gaining on the other in this battle. Eventually he either loses track of me or tries a change of direction, and that's his undoing, as it finally gives me a proper gun solution, and I can set him alight. In many battles, however, the fact is there won't be anything to do at higher altitudes, and you'll need to engage lower down. The obvious tactic to use is boom and zoom attacks, so let's take a look at how the Hellcat performs in that role. I'm in a shallow dive toward a furball, looking to pick up the easiest target possible, one where I don't have to turn hard in order to get a firing solution. P-40 seems the obvious choice. He tracks to my right, my rudder allows me to follow him, get guns on him for long enough to set him alight. Turn away from the zone where the enemies might be and toward friendly spawn, and gently lift the plane into a climb using WEP, checking around me for any threats or potential targets. On this occasion my runway is threatened with a wave of suicide cappers. Drop down into a steep dive behind them, I see multiple targets bunched together, and I engage combat flaps to give me more time to target them and improve my accuracy. I'm waiting till I'm near convergence range before I open fire, and the reticle bucks around a little, but I manage to keep it on target long enough for 2 kills. Then once again into a shallow zoom climb using WEP, while checking my surroundings. It's very important to keep your controlled movements nice and subtle and smooth. This one's a little more complex. The targets are swirling around unpredictably. I dive in hoping a target presents itself, and eventually the F6F stands out. I zoom in for accuracy, open fire from a bit longer range as I approach. Only a critical, but that's taken me out the side of the battle, so I should be able to afford a second pass. I whip up into a loop, copping some bullets as I do so to let me know that I've picked up a chaser. The F4F is still presenting as a clear target, so I finish it off and use my speed to extend away, dodging bullets till I'm out of range. If I turned sideways there instead of vertically to chase the F4F a second time, I would not have had that speed. And yes, I'm clear. Each of these is demonstrating the Hellcat's ability to accelerate in the dive, to manoeuvre at high speed and track a target, to maintain its aim while firing, and to power away after the attack. All essential attributes of a good boom and zoomer. And I must say that its current flight model is the best at these high-speed attacks than any of its previous ones. Prior to 1.43 it locked up too much at high speed. Prior to 1.47 it lacked the necessary engine power and could easily be run down. Sometimes, despite landing lots of shots on targets, you don't succeed in scoring kills, but you just have to accept that when boom and zooming. Maintain your discipline, extend away at high speed and reset for the next attack. Don't be tempted to turn and chase targets. After another pilot kill here, I decided to dive as I extend and run toward my spawn as my approach was shallow, my speed lower than usual, so I'm afraid I could be caught if I zoom climbed. Get distance between yourself and the enemy before looking to gain altitude. This one's a bit more unusual. I see a massive plane surging in. I go into a shallow dive to gain speed, but I'm going to wait until the last one has joined the queue before I finally turn under and slot in behind them. Sometimes you can get multiple kills from a setup like this. After I shoot this P400 down, I turn back and got a nice shot at this climbing Focke-Wulf 198-1, but broke off before I too became a target by slowing down as I climbed after him. And as I dived and extended away, suddenly there was lots of tracer flicking past me, showing that I'd aborted the attack without a moment to lose. In fact, I had a train behind me. If I'd fired at that 190 a moment longer, I'd have been shot down. The success of any boom and zoomer is, however, highly dependent on the effectiveness of its weapons. I've already demonstrated that American 50 cals now score most of their kills through fires and pilot knockouts. Therefore, you're looking to get as many bullets on targets as you can, hoping that the random number generator rolls the dice in your favour. You simply can't expect to rip a plane's wing off anymore. It just doesn't happen in War Thunder right now. 50s have been more powerful in the past, maybe they will be again someday, but right now they're just not that reliable, especially with the brief firing opportunities afforded with high-speed boom and zoom attacks. If your experience is anything like mine, you'll get hit after hit, often not have very much to show for your trouble. As the plane isn't a turn fighter, it's harder to keep on target. You'll have a greater chance of losing your plane if you try to force a kill, as I'm doing against this 198-4, who by the way could have easily have rolled away from me, but chose to fly nice and straight. Even against bombers this can sometimes be a problem. A fire refuses to start, or even if it does, it goes out, and you can't fluke a pilot kill, and you're left peppering him with volley after volley to little effect. This Heinkel 111 pilot was quite evasive, made it rather difficult for me to get guns on him, but even so I unloaded a full magazine of 2,000 bullets without bringing him down. I'm firing at or near convergence range, getting lots of sparks, lots of hits, but no critical damage and no fires. Ripped off half his elevator there, which has no effect at all, of course, in arcade. I start a leak from both engines. What will it take to bring this plane down? Notice I'm keeping my speed high, which forces me to overshoot, going into high yo-yos each time, and coming back for a fresh pass. It's better than slowing down at the same speed as he's travelling at. The frustration caused by the guns is actually my enduring impression from flying this plane. I'm used to 650 cals at close convergence causing a lot more damage. Their inability to reliably do so has a huge impact on the effectiveness of the Hellcat. The job of a fighter is to get kills, quickly and efficiently. If it can't do it, either because of an uncompetitive flight model or because its weapons are bad, then it's going to be a difficult plane to do well in. This obviously affects all planes armed with M250 cals as well, not just the Hellcat. But a boom and zoomer is far more susceptible to it. I am, as an energy fighter, really impressed with the Hellcat right now. I love how it flies in patch 1.47. It's just that when it comes down to it, and you have your guns on target, and it's a lottery as to whether you'll shoot it down or just scratch its paint. And by the way, let me express my admiration for how well that bomber pilot flew his plane. He really made me work hard to get guns on him. And skill like that isn't something you see every day in a bomber pilot, I'm afraid to say. I had to take my eyes off him here for a moment to track a lurking P-38. But once he flew away, I was finally able to drop in with fresh ammo and finish the kill I'd worked so hard for, the only kill that I got in this game. Very short battle as it was, typically on this map. And I actually get a wing rip here. And of course it can take so long to kill planes, and you get so many assists, that really does drop the number of kills per battle you'll get. Anyway, I decided to show you this last battle as it really does encapsulate the typical effectiveness of the Hellcat at low altitude combat. I'm going to make repeated boom and zoom passes here. I'll note down the number of occasions on which I believe I would probably have shot a plane down if I'd fired, say, a pair of 20mm cannon instead of 650 cals, or even if I'd been firing the 50 cals as they were 6 months ago. Okay, this TBF's curling around nicely. Just a hit, but it was a brief burst, and cannons may not have done the job either. Well behind my lines, so I can afford to loop over for another quick pass. And this time I get a really nice deflection shot. Long burst, right on target, and not even a hit. I do believe I should have shot him down for sure, so that's one that I've missed out on. Go chasing after this 190, as I certainly don't want a plane like that lurking around behind enemy lines. I just get a brief snapshot at him here as he passes me. So no problem there, I would not expect that to be a kill. He flies off into the distance chasing the Dornier, so I head back to the battlefield. Alright, there's plenty of targets. I wait till I'm above them, and then in I go. The P-47 looks to be the best choice. And I hit him with several good deflection bursts, right at convergence, and they score hits. Pretty sure with cannons that would have been a kill, so that's 2 that I've missed. Extending up and away, this really is a good boom and zoom plane. Tons of power on tap, and it regains its altitude so very easily. Ready for my next attack run. Bit of a train's formed near the runway, so that's ideal. Although they break up and start swirling around before I get there. The Velosa shot lines up on the Spitfire. Get a fairly good burst at him. Cannons may or may not have done the job there, but I won't count it. Bullets certainly didn't do the job though. Once again, I have tons of speed and power to extend out of danger and climb to reset. I think of making a risky attack here, but decide against it when I see a P-38 helicoptering above me. I turn my dive into a low yo-yo, use the speed to attack him from beneath, and I finally fluke a pilot knockout. So I've scored the kill in this battle. The climb brings me out in the tail of a 110, and a long burst is able to only inflict a few meaningless hits. Then he can dive away to safety. I followed him for a while, thinking he might return, and in doing so I found myself high over the enemy spawn area. Thinking of turning back towards the battlefield, but I saw an enemy spawn in, turned toward him, and as I did I noticed a Corsair climbing hard at me. I lifted the nose a little and watched while waiting for him to stall out. Okay, that's probably long enough. A little bit late on my attack, so starting to dive away. Come on, come on. Finally a fire. Now I've dived further than I wanted to, so I'm going to get out of here, keeping it going in a long boom and zoom run back toward the airfield, zigzagging gently to prevent planes behind me landing a long range shot. And notice my speed, up towards 700 kilometers an hour even in a gentle dive. Eventually the Corsair burns down for my second kill as I line up a shot on another Corsair. With cannons that plane would be dead, so that's a third kill I've missed due to the 50 cals. And I wave off this P-38 as I'm mindful of the planes that may have chased me from their spawn area. Just a bit more evasion as I run to get clear. And yes, I am clear. Out of danger, I'm going to a climb. And now I'm back above 1,000 metres again. There's the usual cluster of red planes around the airfield, so in I go. A nice train is forming behind a friendly 190. But as I get close, I see the Wellington as an easier target, and actually manage to light a fire. I then get some nice shots into this P-39, but to no effect. And I'm off into a zoom climb. The Welly dies, giving me my third kill. One pilot snipe and 2 fires. I can see the game's likely to end soon, so I dive into attack once more. But my altitude was probably too low and I'm not as fast as I'd like to be. I think I have this 110 in the bag, but I'm too slow on the draw. Never mind. I continue the shallow run toward the targets ahead of me, and out of that confusing mass I pick out a P400. Another hit, with cannons that would be a certain kill, which is the 4th one that I've missed. And now I've finally had enough of it, and I make the fatal mistake of looping over in the combat zone, which lets a Corsair get a shot at me and light me up. Fire is the most common cause of deaths for me in this plane. They barely ever go out, but it was my lack of discipline that cost me my plane here. With cannon I could probably have killed that 112 before I died, so that's 5 targets that survived, because I flew a plane with ineffective weapons. And with that, it's time for me to summarise. The plane itself is purely an energy fighter. Dismiss any memories you may have of its powerful elevator. It can no longer turn sharply, and trying to do so will get you in trouble. Instead, you need to gain altitude and use it to either trap enemies into stalling their planes or to conduct boom and zoom attacks. Keep your speed high at all times in a combat zone, especially if you're forced into a dogfight. When boom and zooming, move the plane gently. Try to avoid yanking hard on elevators or rudder, as that will cost you speed. Intercept bombers, but do so carefully, attacking from their blind spots as gunners cannon will set you alight, and once you're burning you're nearly always dead. I really do like how this plane handles now. The old Hellcat was like a brick, and the 1.43 version was twitchy, underpowered and prone to stall spins. This one feels like a proper flight model, but given how often these things change in War Thunder, I'd be surprised if it's not messed with again in some future patch. For a fighter though to be effective, it needs the ability to get kills and the ability to survive if flown to its strengths. The handling's certainly good enough to regularly get your guns on target. The problem is the effectiveness of those guns. If the 50 cals improve in the future, then this will be a wonderful plane. On the question of survivability, the plane seems fairly tough except for the absolute ease at which it catches fire. I've had biplanes blow me up with a few 7.7mm shots to my engine. Otherwise its acceleration and energy retention certainly make it possible to survive a long time in this plane, provided you keep your speed high. I actually started work on this video before patch 1.47 was announced, and when I started I had 135 kills, running at about a 5-to-1 kills to death ratio, and only 2 kills battle, but most of those were from flying it as a backup plane. When I realised it was getting a new flight model, I stopped work while waiting for the patch. At that point I'd added another 85 kills, and nearly 3 kills of flyout, an approximate KDR of 10-to-1. With this 1.47 flight model I've scored another 32 kills, still at 3 kills per flyout, and I've lost the plane twice. I mention this to show the effectiveness of the tactics I demonstrated in the video, but also to show how difficult it is to average a high kill count per battle in this plane due to its weapons. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the video and found it helpful. Until the next one, I'll see you in the skies.